Chris, how's it going? How have you enjoyed the day so far?
It's always refreshing to see some panelists that really knock it out of the park each and every step of the way, and especially from different walks of the security industry, and especially with cyber being at the forefront these days, especially with intelligence, protective intelligence, and now just learning a lot about the healthcare. I think it's quite brilliant.
Perfect. Well, I'm glad because this particular last panel is basically summing up a few of the questions we've had when we're looking at the managed security service of the future. Because of course, managed security doesn't have to be external security. It could be internal service providers. So why don't I simply ask? Let's go around and describe the threat landscape problem we're trying to address first, and then we'll wind our way through to see how we can get a converged function, or at least work more effectively. Sean, welcome. We haven't had you on the panel before. It's great to welcome you. Could you tell everyone a little bit about yourself and then the threat landscape as you see it?
Yeah, thank you for having me, Philemon. I appreciate being on the panel. My personal background, I got into the security world about 5 years ago, hit the ground running, and worked for Siemens for quite a few years. Recently made the transition over to Barton Integration, kind of a more personal consultant-based security company. And so, I mean, I see the threat landscape that's going on in the world today. I mean, it's obviously very dynamic, ever changing. It's hard to be a security person in the world as we're dealing with it now, with the threats of obviously the pandemic we're going through, people that are trying to threaten our safety and security becoming more desperate, more emboldened by the possibilities that we're facing. Overall, just a very dynamic, ever-changing landscape that we seem to be, trying to grasp and understand from, a minute-by-minute basis. So it's been definitely a very challenging time to be a security professional.
Yes, indeed. And I think people are finding new ways of working. Patrick, obviously we welcomed you before, and you came to the last Los Angeles event in Culver City. I've got to get that right because, of course, it's independent cities. They get sensitive with that. What do you see? What do you see as the threat landscape we're trying to address?
Hi, Phil. How are you? Hi, everybody. I think for us, well, I guess first in terms of my background, I've been with Atlas Air now for about 19 years. Before that, I was a Marine Corps infantry officer. The primary area of focus I have is really operations and protection of our personnel who are traveling overseas, and here within the United States as well, too. In terms of the threat, I think the primary thing I'm seeing that's concerning, and I think that requires us to kind of sharpen our arrows a little bit, is the convergence between things on the cyber side and things on the physical side. So seeing things as an example would be, if you're looking at stalking, you can have an incident that begins as cyber stalking and ends up becoming physical. Or you can have a situation where if you're concerned about, say, protection of a facility or a person, you can see a lot of the targeting happening first on the cyber side and then ultimately advancing onto the physical side. So I think for individuals whose experience is more on the physical side, we need to start to have a stronger partnership with our counterparts on the cyber side and a stronger understanding at the macro scale of things on the cyber end as well.
Okay, no, that's nice. And Chris, obviously you're coming at this from a slightly different perspective, but what's the threat landscape that we might want to address with the MSS of tomorrow?
Yeah, thanks, Palm. Hey, everybody. Quickly, first on my background, at Netflix for 3 years now. Prior to that, I was close protection for a bunch of high-profile, high-net-worth individuals, and then prior to that was Marine Corps as well. The threat landscape where we see things these days happens to come from well, in the past couple months, it's been this the stay-at-home situation, and the folks that we end up taking a close eye at trying to keep protected, which is actually a little bit of a divergent because the folks that we look after typically come in and out of our working lives because of the nature of production and publicity. We've seen that the stay-at-home has actually brought more of a target, a physical target to the bad actors that know, well, they know where they are. And that's an interesting piece right now. But I can say, just kind of extrapolating from what Patrick just mentioned, is that the duality of physical and cyber comes to a head when, you know, we've got, and I'm not speaking specifically about our organization, but more to the point of entertainment, is that, you know, part of branding for high profiles is keeping very relevant to today. And in the past 2 to 3 weeks, there's very relevant things and very actionable things that put them back into the limelight. And so the take up for us specifically is having a real fine-tuned ability to understand what their pain points are, what organizational pain points there are, and then how to then execute and put into play the correct levers and pull them.
So what do you think are the pain points that require the MSS of tomorrow, Chris? You know, is it that, you know, we're trying to do something new, or is it that they're going to require you to change?
Well, I think it's prudent to mention that, you know, the professionals of today would like to fancy themselves a very proactive organization or an organism that gets out in front of issues, and that clear leadership and clear operational execution takes care of the majority of the issues. And of course, setting in line contingency planning to take care of the what ifs and the things that go bump in the night. I think the forward-looking aspect of the threat landscape has absolutely to do with the ever-changing dynamic of today. And that's such a wishy-washy comment because we weren't expecting to be in a pandemic, and now we are, and now everyone's trying to consistently stay a head above water, but at the same time trying to also innovate. And I think the innovation portion of a converged managed security team would be having a utilitarian type of mindset to know that it's probably better nowadays to be more of a generalist than it is a specialist. But the problem is that there's a lot of specialists. And then how do you make that into a more powerful tool to help out the issues that pains your organization?
It's a tricky one. Matt, are you on the phone?
Yes, I am. I'm sorry you can't see me. I can see you guys, but I'm here.
Perfect. Well, you and Patrick together very kindly were on that panel I was mentioning when it was a purely public-private partnership type of a topic. But what do you see as a threat landscape now that might necessitate a new MSS? We've gone through the whole ranks of the event, looking at the cyber side, the MSP side. But from the corporate security perspective, what's the threat landscape?
That's a great question. I mean, I think it's changed a bit. I think, you know, certainly from my perspective and where I'm working at Parsons, travel's kind of come to a halt. That was a big thing for us, was people traveling overseas or traveling to different locations, and certainly security in the office. But now we've pushed a lot of people home. We're actually looking to reduce our office footprint over the next couple of years, to reduce almost in half our office space, because we've determined that people can work from home. We've got a lot of knowledge workers. So really it's that. It comes down to, you know, thinking about how safe are people at home? Are there some domestic violence issues that they're dealing with? Is that something that we can even talk about or deal with? And then also, I know one of the other panelists talked about, you know, the security of whether it be physical documents at home or the strength of their cybersecurity at home, keeping information safe. I think those are the two big things that are kind of top of mind right now. And of course, you know, COVID-19 and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, definitely. It's been an interesting journey so far, and I still have no access to a hairdresser. So yeah, you might see me brushing it away. Obviously, on this panel, what we're trying to do is get people from a wealth of different levels of experience. So we've got people at different stages with different experiences. Sean, before, when we talked to Martin Nielsen, he was talking about the emergence of the technical physical security officer. Do you think there's any mileage to that? What are your thoughts, Sean?
I think, obviously we're talking about convergence between the physical and the information side of security. And I definitely think that we're seeing them come together more than ever. Now, as Chris's point, most of us are working from home or remotely. A lot of our employees or coworkers are working remotely. Having the understanding between the information and physical space, I think is absolutely critical at this point, to make sure that our organizations are staying as secure as possible. To be completely removed from one or the other really isn't playing into what we should be doing as security professionals, which is keeping our companies safe. You need to be able to understand both sides of the equation and not just focus on one or the other. To be a physical security professional or an information security professional in this day and age requires you to be dynamic, be completely understanding of both sides, and really, obviously the convergence of worlds is extremely important.
Well, do you think you might have an advantage? I mentioned the different levels of experience, and that's what I'm sort of trying to celebrate in a way, because either people are not digital natives, or they are digital natives, or they've become digital natives. Do you think the people coming through the ranks now, we won't even need to talk about the technical, physical security specialists? Do you think they have an advantage at all, Sean?
You would think so, but with the dynamic world of technology, it's changing so rapidly. I feel like I'm learning something new about networking and the information side every day, even though that's something that maybe the younger generations have been brought up on, and we understand the digitalization strategy of some corporations, how things are connected and interwoven within organizations in the world. But with all that being said, it's still a complicated world out there, and there's still things that are being changed every day, within every minute. And new strategies are being come up with, and new technologies are being brought to the market. I would say yes to your point of there may be a advantage in that realm, but I would say that would be quickly met and caught up with someone being educated and understanding the world around them.
I like that. Well then, let's take that. Let's put that to you, Patrick. Obviously, let's say that someone throughout their entire life had digital technology everywhere. I think Sean makes a good point. Just because that exists, something new will come along, and you still got to deal with that. What do you think, Patrick? What types of technologies do you think physical security is going to sink its teeth into? Coming up very soon.
Yeah, I think he's 100% spot on with that. I think that we can't, any of us, afford to kind of sit back and think we can be comfortable. I think we always have to be expanding our understanding of things as it evolves, because our adversaries are as well too. So, but I think it is a valid point too that for people who grew up with computers and things like that, I think they do have an innate advantage over some of us on the older end of the spectrum, maybe, who were introduced at an older age to all the types of technologies. In terms of things, I think for us to harness on the physical side, I think we're seeing, particularly on the Intel side, the advent of products and services which are providing us information for us to decide our plans, our procedures, and so forth in a more accurate way. And I see that as one of the areas, at least for myself, which is very helpful in helping us to implement our strategies and our procedures and our operational methodology. I think one concern I have about technology on the physical side, especially when you start looking at things like involving GPS or involving cameras in places that you would ordinarily have individuals with eyes on and so forth, is that we don't want, I think, ever rely 100% on technology or not have a fallback or a kind of a backup plan. Because even as we're on this now, speaking, you know, online, any kind of interference, any kind of issue, and all of a sudden we're not going to be in contact anymore. So I think there's a concern for making sure we always have a kind of backup plan or kind of pace plan, as we call it, like primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, when we're talking about comms or we're talking about navigation and so on. Because if we're putting all our eggs in that basket and it falls through and we don't have any kind of a backup, we're going to have a serious problem. And I think that that's one area maybe for people on the younger side to focus on, because of the fact that they've been so ingrained in technology, to still work on developing skill sets that they can apply if that ends up falling through.
No, I like it, and I think we're definitely going to need some non-proprietary networks. You know, some, you know, what happens when the GSM networks go down? What happens when Zoom goes down? We always need that type of backup. I tell you what, let me then ask Chris, because James Bohr came up with a question which I think is quite nice. A lot of people on the cyber side anyway might be a little bit intimidated by the world of EP, kidnap and ransom, and, you know, darker sides of things, in the same way that maybe the physical side might you know, look at cyber as mysterious. So James asks, is there a need for people on the cyber side to have a deeper understanding of the physical side? Are there any lessons or principles that cross domain that, you know, but are less well understood than the other? You know, what lessons do you have to teach them, Chris?
Well, first and foremost, that's a fantastic question that's super relevant for right now. And I'm able to piggyback off of what Patrick just mentioned. I think there's an incredible amount of information sharing that could take place in an organization where the realization is that I have a deficiency and I'm going to find someone that's fantastic to fill in that gap. So there's a little bit of a humbling aspect to both sides of the aisle. So for me specifically, the cyber train left a long time ago, and I don't think I can hitch my wagon to it other than finding an SME that will absolutely knock it out of the park, and using then that opportunity as far as a relationship to then fill them in on what my eyes see on a human behavioral level. And for instance, the overwhelming tools that come to people's advantages in the cyber realm from their mindset is that then I would be able to, or folks like us would be able to say like, hey, listen, totally understand what you're trying to accomplish here, but here's where the difference is when it's actions on a situation that's developing. So I like to use the example of we've used a product such as like Data Miner, and so Data Miner is a very interesting product because it has a near me function on the mobile app, and anything that hits the world around me within a couple miles or so, I get to find out about it, which kind of frustrates the GSOC because they're manning it and they like to know information and they like to push and pull. And of course, the escalation to incident management is a very big deal, especially across all enterprises and business units, just for continuity of information. But I'll tell you what, I'm the guy on the ground. I want to be the most informed in order to make the right decision to save lives, to stave off confidentiality issues or whatever the scenario is. But to answer James's question more succinctly, it's that I'm so curious to know what makes their side tick. I'm sure I could possibly find that one little loophole in a question and fill it in for them, just to make that end user or that scenario just that much better. And so I would more likely that to an openness to relationship building, and also knowing from a pure leadership standpoint is understanding what levers and how to pull them correctly with no ego, because it's the mission that means the most out of everything. And it's an easy Marine thing to say that, you know, it's mission accomplishment and troop welfare comes second. But at the same time, we're in a world where seconds matter, impressions and optics matter. And how do you want to be perceived on the right of bang after an incident? So hopefully it's that you put enough due diligence with the other side of the aisle, trying to understand the way that they do stuff and legitimately carving out time to understand those ones and zeros that cybersecurity experts are known for, or the products that they build or their way to teach. I know that on the EP side, you know, the glamorous side of doing EP is unfortunately a demystification for the majority of folks that do that roles, because it's the 18 hours on your feet, it's the thanklessness, it's the up before the client, it's the down before or after the client. It's the stuff that, you know, nobody really talks about unless you're getting trained to do it. But that's an interesting point as far as the two sides of the aisle. It's like you utilizing your time to just better the micro level, like that detail, or on the macro level at an organizational approach to being so well confident in the team's ability to execute that everyone feels like they've got buy-in. I think that's my take.
I like it. Everyone feels they got buy-in, you know who to call, you've got a better understanding. And maybe they need a better understanding of the threat sides that are open to them, you know, that they may not have considered. You know, you buy all the fancy sparkly box for cyber in the world. I know people have, you know, criticized me, saying, "Oh, don't say sparkly box. That's too derogatory." But certainly, if you leave the door open, suddenly, it's an issue. Matt, I'd be interested to hear your side of this. How do you convince the other side, you know, to learn something from you in the physical side?
I think that's a great question too. And like Chris said, I mean, it's important that we work together. We're basically two sides of the same coin. And a lot of things that start in the cyber world, whether it be, you know, attempted breaches, or talking about if it's someone we're protecting, our CEO or somebody online, can turn into that physical manifestation of workplace violence, or if it's an internal threat, insider threat that can turn into violence. And so it's so important to, at least as a first step, maybe have lunch with the cyber and intel security specialists and let them know, hey, you know, what you're seeing out there, even if it seems small to you, even if it's a small thing, you don't think much of it, please share it. Please don't be afraid to overshare with us, physical security folks, you know, what you're seeing, so that we can have some eyes on it as well. And I think that's where the conversation starts. And then from there, maybe it is some shared training, some shared, you know, meetings, some, you know, some buy-in, and then maybe working on some projects together within the organization that can add value, you know, from both the physical and the information security side.
And Matt, do you think that we're going to see this a lot more with home working, especially because, well, a disgruntled employee now only needs to go round to the address of the person they're disgruntled about, you know, and there's no one there. Maybe is that a realistic scenario, Matthew, or is that just all in our heads, or my head?
I think it can be. I mean, I've noticed just in the couple of months that everybody's been home that I've had more interactions with our team. And I think, you know, part of it is kudos to our CSO, who's really kind of pulled the team together. But I think there is more information sharing. And that's a great example that you mentioned, Pelham, is that, you know, it's much easier to find people. People are less guarded. We're not, you know, our homes aren't the kind of fortresses maybe that we have at our offices. So it's important. And, you know, one of the things that I was working on even prior to this was doing an assessment of sort of our C-suite's homes. And I think that's going to become even more important when we can travel again to kind of look at those vulnerabilities for some of our top people.
Yeah, definitely. In the lockdown, when we did the first executive security webinar in March, where we basically said, now what? A number of you were there, so thank you. It's nice. But one of the things people raised was very, you know, ultra high net worth individuals had fired their security team to hang out on their own in their own remote location, thinking they don't need any help because no one could find them or something. Anyway, they've since changed that, so we hear. But that was a big topic back in March when everybody was a bit worried. In the audience, we got nice comments. In fact, we got lots of comments. One thing I'd like to tease out from something Elio is saying is the increase in side channel attacks and the vulnerability of the digital systems, you know, be that servers or actual IoT devices. Sean, you previously worked in an environment where technology was quite prevalent. do you see an increase in physical attacks on some of these digital systems?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's part of the convergence between the information team or the information technology team and the physical security team, is that all of these devices are being brought onto the network, right? They're all, and once they're brought onto the network, they're considered vulnerabilities. Obviously, we have the main parts of security: cameras, access control, those pieces. But IoT, lighting is being brought onto the network. You know, all these pieces of a building or a community that, you know, used to be analog or, you know, dumb devices are now being, they're monitored. They're need to be updated with the correct firmware. All of these things, they need to be accounted for, and a lot of times, either through negligence or, you know, not knowing any better, they're pushed off to the side. Hey, those things are taken care of. We're installed. I'm so happy I got a my hospital or whatever's has smart lighting now, and I can understand what my energy usage is on those. But those become avenues for penetration into the systems. And that's something that we need to understand and make sure that we are communicating to our companies and firms and the people that we're paid to protect, that these things need to be understood. They need to be protected in everything that we consider and put on the network, no matter what it is, no matter how small we consider. I mean, I've known of certain companies that I won't say that were infiltrated through a cyber attack through their printer, just because they did not update their printer licenses effectively. And those sort of things, you know, weren't around 10, 20 years ago, that, you know, we were all talking about the younger generation coming up with computers and digital information more readily available. Those are things that we need to make sure we pay attention to.
Very good. And whilst you're saying that, Martin Nielsen says IoT equals Internet of Threats, not things. So, you know, so it's good. It's good fun. I'll tell you what then, let's give everyone a bit of a closing statement, because our question for this panel is, how can we create this converged managed security of the future, be that in-house or external? Patrick, what's your thoughts? What's your message? You know, even after you've heard everything today, maybe you've changed your opinion, maybe it's the same. How can we create this converged service?
Well, I think we really have to work on making sure that we're in constant contact with our IT counterparts, really. And that's easy to say, but I think beyond just saying it, we really have to make sure that we go put it into practice. And I think Chris had some excellent examples when he talked about, or actually, maybe it was actually Matt, apologies, I'm not sure who it was who said it, but the idea of integrating with them on training on projects, I think it was actually Matt, integrating with them on training and projects and so forth, so that you start to kind of have a familiarity with them, with the personality types and so forth, and you start to understand how they view the world, and they start to understand what your perspective is. Because I think oftentimes us being able to connect the separate dots on threats is going to be important for both the IT team and the security team to have that kind of contact and connectivity. And I think it's something that we really all have to make a conscious effort on either side of the aisle with that. And I think one of the obstacles we've historically had has been, I think, the kind of backgrounds and experiences of our IT folks, and compared to us, are often quite different. Our personality types are often quite different. But I think we have to expend every effort to kind of bridge that gap. And I think we also need to understand each other's issues more. So for us, I mean, yeah, I'm not going to catch a cyber train. I understand that, but I can understand the issues, or strive to understand the issues on a kind of more macro scale, so that when it comes up, at least I understand in general terms what the issue is, and then I can have my IT partner handle things at the more granular scale.
That'd be good. I like it. You can become dangerous. You don't have to know it. Let me snake back around on my screen then, and I'll go Sean, and then I'll go Matt, and then I'll go Chris. Before Sean, I was talking about digital natives. I got a ticking off in the audience because apparently that's even the creator of that phrase doesn't like it anymore. What do you think? How can we create this converged function?
I won't comment on the phrases we can or can't use anymore. But I think, to Patrick's point earlier, the communication between the information and the physical security worlds just needs to be more and more open and free, and understanding. I'm not going to sit here and make it sound like I'm the cybersecurity expert either, but we need to make sure that we're having constant communications, and we're all on the same team at the end of the day. I know that we can be frustrated by each other. I've had my battles with IT professionals in what I wanted to bring on their network, quote, their network, no one else's network. And they look at me the same way. What are you trying to do? You're while you're trying to create the physical landscape more secure, you're threatening the information side of the world as well. So we need to make sure that we're in the constant balance of yin and yang, so we create that harmony in the security world, rather than one side is wrong or one side is right.
I like it. Yin and yang. Matt, are you a subscriber as well to yin and yang?
I like that. I like the yin and yang, and I think it goes a little deeper than that too. I think from a broader perspective, I know that my team is very small. There's very few of us, and even our IT security team is very small. So it's important to include our vendors out there, our partners that we rely on to get things done. I know without them, I wouldn't be effective at all if I didn't have good vendors and people that do our access control and our kind of our virtual SOC, and when we need them, overseas executive protection. And so it's important to get everybody on the same page and have those conversations and maybe even understand, maybe to take it a little step further, even understand some of the vendors that our IT security professionals are using, so we know what they're doing and understand what they can do. And it seems like sometimes vendors are a little more willing to share, a little more willing to provide some free training or overview for us. Physical security professionals, maybe that's a way for us to learn without having to get a master's degree in cybersecurity. So just a few thoughts.
No, good, great thoughts. And I think maybe a lot of people will be disenchanted with formal university training. The requirement for degrees for absolutely everything. I don't know, after this pandemic, will we be in the move for more diplomas, more bespoke training?
No, yeah. I think you're right, and to Sean's point too. I mean, as fast as things change, a degree in cybersecurity today may be irrelevant in 6 months. So I think it's important to just stay as up to date as you can through more simple learning and through conversations and maybe some simple vendor training or internal training. I like it. Continuous learning. For the yin and yang, we're developing a theme here, aren't we? The circle. Chris, what do you think? You've heard a lot today. We've looked at healthcare. We've looked at architects, SOCs, CISOs, threat intel. How could we develop this converged security service?
Yeah, I think it, as far as a broad stroke, and just to kind of recap on those sentiments as well as this really great panel's thoughts, is that I think the yin and the yang of it is, to use Sean's, is to say that it sounds to me like more transparency and feedback is definitely desirable from an internal and external as far as expectations. And also always remembering that it's the end user, the client, that matters the most, and fulfilling those needs and requirements, and not just to boost what it is that the internal team is trying to accomplish, but to be very humble as far as what execution will ultimately look like in the future. But then to also be to be mindful of the fact that the future also is heavily weighed on inclusion and diversity. I would say is to have an open mind as to what the new kind of aspects of the folks that are coming up in the ranks, and also that might not actually be part of the security ecosystem at this point, because those different ideas and perspectives absolutely tackle those hard issues when they do pop up. So I'm sure in each of the organizations that are here in this panel, listening there at home, is that nobody was ready for nobody was really foreseeing a pandemic with the outcome like we have in this past 4 months, but people did what it was take to find the right answers and the solutions. And I think that's a real human aspect, and then digging down deep to find those solutions. Now, whether it be on the cyber side or the physical security side, I could say that, you know, the issue sure took care of putting everyone on notice to come up with a really great solution. And I think today we heard some fantastic examples of that.
Great. No, I like it, because we're going to have an output. That could be the output for the conference. We can harness these solutions to work better together. But we are now over time. I've let us run on because it is the last panel of the day, so we have that luxury. But I've had a great time with this panel. Please give us a wonderful virtual round of applause for Sean, Patrick, Chris, and Matt on the audio. It's been a pleasure having you here. Let's do the virtual clapping. Zishan is clapping a lot. Elio has made lots of nice comments throughout. It's really quite an honor to finish with you. As I said, I had the Chief of General Defense Staff at the end of a conference once, so you know that's what we're doing. I will welcome you to our next forum, and I will put you back before the closing remarks. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Bellum. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all so much.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Yes, lots of yin yang, lots of joint working. This has been a fantastic MSS forum. You know, we've often run it in places like San Diego and Denver and Phoenix, of course. Albuquerque was just a few weeks ago. And today we have looked at the CISO of the future. We've looked at how to securely mine your data warehouse. We've looked at insider threats. We've looked at the MSS of the future. We've looked at a tour de force of geopolitical challenges. Often, you know, quite a lofty thing to look at. The secure MSP of the future. We've looked at the ISOC of the future. We have looked at the architect. We've looked at converging physical security and technology. We've looked at healthcare in particular, and the MSS of the future for healthcare. And then we've finished with the possibility of a converged security function or converged security service of the future. Lots and lots of people to thank, but in particular, can I thank Alta for supporting us, Noble for supporting us, Hack Definite for supporting us. It's been a pleasure to have their support. Please do visit their sites and, you know, catch up with Brian Stoner or Eric Cron or Mike Goedicker. It's great to have them. Thank you to all the people in the audience. Thank you, Sam, Zishan, Elio, Martin. It's great when we get so many great comments. James, of course. Nice to still see Brett there. Chris, Elio, Greg, Ivan, James, Jerry, Jess, Martin, Patrick, Sandal, Sean, Stephen, and Zishan, all the way to the very end. You are the hardcore people. It's a pleasure. We are going to put some snippets on our YouTube channel, so it's always really good if you consider subscribing. We've got a variety of ways to keep in touch. Please do think about the 9th of July SOC of the Future. That's done for particularly an American time zone friendly, starting at 10 EST. Thank you, Ilio. Please do connect on Facebook. We've added a couple of videos already. Yeah. Thank you, James. John Watson is our wonderful avatar on Instagram. Thank you, Brett. YouTube, of course, please do subscribe. I do my weekly marketing thoughts, but you know, there's a lot more value than me making my cheesy videos. We've got Twitter, of